With Season 2 of Severance coming to a close a few days back, the number one debate that I have seen online is whether Mark S. was in the right to pick Helly over Gemma. Was he immoral? Was he selfish? And everything in between. So today, I'm going to answer this question and explain why I believe it not only makes sense for him to make the decision he made, but why that decision works morally. Now the first thing I want to go over is any Mark's birth in general. Mark S. is born out of the trauma response of his Audi. Mark, being mentally and emotionally broken by the loss of his wife, decides to become severed in order to tuck away and avoid his pain. So whether or not you want to accept this, Mark S. is born purely out of selfishness of Audi Mark. It is understandable, but it is selfish. Do I have empathy for the decision? Absolutely. But there is no denying that Mark S. was born not out of kindness, but out of necessity as a trauma response. In trying to escape his depression, Mark created someone without considering the consequences of his actions. Mark S. did not ask to be born, and that is why I don't believe he owes his creator any sort of thanks for his existence. His existence is his, and his alone. Now the next thing I want to go over is the potential reintegration argument that Audi Mark gives to Mark S. Even though reintegration looks super nice on paper, the argument that Mark S. would get absorbed and forgotten in the well of life that is Audi Mark is a solid one. 2 years compared to over 30 doesn't make for a balanced life between the two. Mark S. doesn't deserve to die or be absorbed into a fragment of himself in order to satisfy his creator's desires. Moving on, the next point I want to discuss is the uneven level of respect that Mark has for Mark S. In the finale, Mark calls Mark S. childish. While he makes an attempt to reason with him and treat him as an equal, the whole scene feels a bit off. It feels more like an attempt to treat him as an equal in order to satisfy his desire than actually viewing him as a true partner. Symbolized perfectly by the fact that he doesn't know Helly R's true name, showing that Mark doesn't truly fully care or understand Mark S, and only really cares enough to satisfy what he needs. Furthermore, the relationship that Mark S has with Helly R, while only on the severed floor, isn't any less valid and real than Mark's marriage to Gemma. For all intensive purposes, Mark S and Helly R are each other's worlds. They only know one another in terms of love, and in a weird way, they have been together for an overwhelmingly impactful amount of time, considering the ratio of their time alive to their time together. Heck, for Helly, she's cared for and started falling in love with Mark her entire life. And now bringing us to the final scene. Even though he didn't have to, Mark S actually does go through with everything Mark asks him to do. He saves Gemma's life and gets her out of Lumen. There was no requirement that he too had to leave, sacrifice his life, and die for his Audi. In fact, I believe him even taking a second to decide shows an unbelievable amount of empathy and kindness that he didn't have to have in this moment. Therefore, Mark choosing Helly R at the end wasn't some kind of crazy betrayal that some people claim. It's not only a sensible decision, but it's a morally sound one. Mark S is a good person and deserves love and respect as well. And now the final argument that I want to mention is one that is very hypothetical, but I still find relevant. With Gemma out in the real world, I think it is undeniable that eventually Lumen will fall. And with this outcome, there is a high chance that Mark S and Helly R will cease to exist because Severance just might not be a thing anymore. And I believe this is something that both Mark S and Helly are inherently aware of, and that's why they're trying to make the most of the time they have. And this is a really beautiful sentiment because it's kind of like all of our own individual lives. Like Mark S and Helly R, eventually we all will pass, our time will come. But why should Mark S and Helly R rush this conclusion just because it's inevitable? Which is why I find the whole moral high ground argument that a lot of people are throwing at Mark S to be unreasonable. Because if placed in a similar situation, I believe most people would have done the same thing. But anyways, thank you all for watching if you made it this far. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.